Do you ever wonder what we can really trust in this world? For instance, when we go and see the doctor, are they really doing things to make us well? In school, are we getting more of an education or indoctrination? At the grocery store, when we buy our food, is it really contributing to our health? Is it even real food? When we flip on the TV, are we being informed by the news or propagandized? When we go to church, are we being spiritually fed meat, even being given milk? Is it even the truth or a slickly packaged illusion meant only to tickle our ears for an hour on Sunday? Do you ever feel like something is seriously wrong? Like the world is becoming less real? That everyone's becoming disconnected from the people around them? Like everything's a little bit hollow, plastic? Like the walls are closing in bit by bit, and a prison is slowly being built around you, around us all, but nobody seems to notice, let alone care. But there is something real that's under the surface, and it's, well, calling out, beckoning to you. What is that? God? Or something, someone else? The truth is, we're all being drawn to one of two extremes, a duality, but more deceptive because the darkness lures its victims with the false light. It's a massive delusion which has befallen all of humanity, a veil placed in front of our eye so that we perceive everything through a glass darkly, the blind leading the blind through this maze that has trapped us all as we go about circling around and around, over and over, distracting and mesmerizing so we don't realize we're all sinking downward, submerging into absolute desolation. But there is hope. There is but one way out of this bondage, and that is by the illumination from the Spirit of the Almighty Creator, sent down to enlighten the way, the only road out, to show you the narrow path that leads to freedom and out of the Black Cube. We can all see that we're in a fallen realm, a disfigured world. Is our only hope to escape this earth? Or perhaps that is the deception, the first heresy, one that has persisted and permeates even unto the supposed houses of God to this very day. Then what is this dark cube, this prison? Is it earth? In many ancient cosmologies, heaven is represented as circular, and earth is represented by a square or cube. This is because there are 4 directions on a compass, 4 directions that you can travel as you're walking. There are 4 seasons that we go through, and there are 4 basic elements that make up this world. The circle is more mysterious. It goes in all directions and is harder to define, much like the spirit. This cosmology in China is called Gai Tian. It's an ancient, traditional concept where the earth is represented as a cube and represents the material world. It's the same in Tibetan Buddhism, where the earth is represented by a cube. This same philosophy has been incorporated into Masonry. You can see that in their main symbol of the square and compass. The square representing the earth and the compass, the higher spiritual realm. It's also echoed in Egypt. The pharaoh is often depicted sitting on a cubic throne, and sometimes the Egyptian sun god is shown guiding the human soul from the cube back to their place in the starry sky. This same cosmology is represented by Greek thought as well. Pythagoras, the scholar and founder of Western philosophy, was devout in a Gnostic forerunner religion called Orphism, which had a holy trinity of Orpheus, Dionysus, and Eurydice. In this religion, Dionysus is killed by the Titans, which Zeus kills them and turns them to ash, and from these ashes humanity is born, the body of humanity from the ash of the Titans, but the divine spark or soul is inherited from Dionysus. They believed in order to achieve salvation from the material world, one had to be initiated into the Dionysian mysteries and undergo ritual purification, reliving the suffering and death of the god. And at death, if they did this right, they would spend eternity alongside Orpheus and other heroes. The uninitiated, they believed, would be reincarnated back on Earth indefinitely. According to Socrates, physical objects and events are shadows of their ideal or perfect forms. Just as shadows are temporary, inconsequential phenomena produced by physical objects are themselves fleeting phenomena caused by more substantial causes, the ideals of which are mere instances. Greek philosopher Plato popularized the belief that souls would migrate to other bodies after death. He states this in his dialogue in Republic. He says men were seen passing into animals, and wild and tame animals changing into each other. In his view, the number of souls was fixed. Birth, therefore, is never the creation of a soul, but only a transmigration from one body to another. He associated each of the four classical elements with a regular solid. Earth was associated with the cube. Plato's teachings also highly influenced the ancient Gnostics, who believed this world was a counterfeit created by an ignorant and flawed god known as the Demiurge. They believed the Demiurge trapped our spirits in this false reality, and it was up to us to free ourselves from it using gnosis, or secret knowledge. If we didn't succeed in doing so, we'd be forced to reincarnate and start again from scratch. Ancient Buddhists and Hindus believed something along the same lines, but instead they called the material world Maya, or illusion, and the cycle of reincarnation samsara. Release from samsara is called moksha, and that is the ultimate goal in Hinduism. This can be done through the path of bhakti, which is devotion, karma, which is work, jnana, which is knowledge, or raja, which is meditation. Failure to do so results in beings bound to the world and compels them to go through an endless series of births and deaths, stuck in this hell realm. All of these belief systems have a commonality, and that is to transcend this material realm, which is not as real as it seems. But is this really true? Are we hoping to ascend out of this evil material earth, this prison planet? Quote, Hermes asked if all men did not have minds, and the great dragon replied, Take heed what you say, for I am the mind, the eternal teacher. I am the Father of the Word. For when I come, they immediately know all things and adore the universal Father. Before such wise and philosophic ones die, they learn to renounce their senses, knowing that these are the enemies of the immortal souls. Hermes bowed his head in thankfulness to the great dragon who had taught him so much, and begged to hear more concerning the ultimate of the human soul. So, the dragon resumed, At death, the material body of man is returned to the elements from which it came, and the invisible divine man ascends to the source from which he came, namely the eighth sphere. The evil passes to the dwelling place of the demon, and the senses, feelings, desires, and body passions return to their source, namely these seven governors, whose natures in the lower man destroy, but in the invisible spiritual man give life. It ascends the seven rings upon which sit the seven governors, and returns to each their lower powers. Upon the seventh ring sits Saturn, at the gate of chaos, and to it are returned falsehood and evil plotting. Then, being naked of all the accumulations of the seven rings, the soul comes to the eighth sphere, namely, the ring of the fixed stars. Here, freed of all illusion, it dwells in the light, and sings praises to the Father in a voice which only the pure spirit may understand. Behold, O Hermes, there is a great mystery in the eighth sphere. For the Milky Way is the seed ground of souls, and from it they drop into the rings, and to the Milky Way they return again from the wheels of Saturn. But some cannot climb the seven-runged ladder to the rings. So they wander in darkness below and are swept into eternity with the illusion of sense and earthliness. The path to immortality is hard, and only a few find it. The rest await the great day when the wheels of the universe shall be stopped and the immortal sparks shall escape from the sheaths of the substance. Woe unto those who wait, for they must return again, unconscious and unknowing, to the seed ground of stars and await a new beginning. Those who are saved by the light of the mystery which I have revealed unto you, O Hermes, shall deliver themselves up to the light, and shall be absorbed into the light, and in the light they shall become powers in God. This is the way of good, and it is revealed only to them that have wisdom." Unquote. That was a quote from the Greek work The Corpus Hermeticism, 100 to 300 AD, a text sacred to Free M, the Kabbalists, Gnostics, alchemy, and the occult world. It describes how the soul must ascend through the 7 planets, and if it can get past Saturn, the last gate, and it has the secret knowledge, it can ascend into godhood. 33-degree Free M. Albert Pike likewise describes souls in Morals and Dogma, and how this belief went from Egypt to Persia to the Greeks, and then the Romans, and finally the Gnostics. Quote, "God sent to man Osiris and Isis, accompanied by Thoth, the incarnation or terrestrial repetition of the first Hermes, who taught men the arts, science, and the ceremonies of religion. Osiris was the principle of good. Typhon was the principle and source of all evil in the moral and physical order. Like the Satan of Gnosticism, he was confounded with matter. From Egypt or Persia, the new Platonists borrowed the idea, and the Gnostics received it from them, that man in his terrestrial career is successively under the influence of the moon, Mercury, Venus, of the sun, Mars, Jupiter, and of Saturn until he reaches the Elysian fields." Unquote. Explaining the soul's descent back to Earth, it says, quote, "In each sphere it receives there the different faculties which it is to exercise while it inhabits the body. In Saturn, it acquires the power of reasoning and intelligence, or what is termed the logical and contemplative faculty." Unquote. He goes on to say that all souls are immortal, and as they rise back through the planets, the soul, quote, "restores to each sphere through which it ascends the passions and earthy faculties it received from them, to Saturn, falsehood and deceit, and at last, relieved of all, it enters naked and pure into the 8th sphere, or highest heaven. All this agrees with the doctrine of Plato, that the soul cannot re-enter into heaven until the revolutions of the universe shall have restored to it its primitive condition and purified it from the effects of its contact with the 4 elements. The Gnostics made the souls ascend and descend through 8 heavens, in each of which were certain powers that opposed their return and drove them back to earth, when not sufficiently purified. The last of these powers, nearest the luminous abode of souls, was a serpent or dragon." Unquote. Saturn, being the furthest planet away, the last ring, had a special place to these ancients. Quote, "The philosophy was largely Aristotle's. Matter had no measurable meaning without form. The energy that created change of form derived from the movement transmitted by the unmoved prime mover, whose movement was communicated to the powers of the fixed stars. This energy made the planets move. Thus, Saturn, the outermost planet, received the first pristine shot of energy from the stars and projected it onto the other planets. This is why Saturn was the star representing the first god of the Greeks, Kronos or time, and why Saturn, Old Father Time, the supreme god, literally the highest. Saturn could be both a planet of melancholy, but also of high insight and genius, being closest to the heavenly realms." Unquote. Invisible History of the Rosicrucians. Saturn is thus seen as both an illuminator of mankind and a soul trap if that soul is not sufficiently illuminated to escape this realm. So it's not surprising Saturn is associated with the cube or prison. What may be surprising, though, is that the Voyager mission in 1981 took a photograph of the North Pole of Saturn, which revealed a perfect hexagram, which is a representation of a cube rotated. History and science tells us there's no way these ancients could have seen this hexagram on the North Pole with their technology, so it is a little curious how they associate Saturn with the cube without actually seeing this cube on its North Pole. Saturn is the sixth planet from the Sun, and to the Romans he was envisioned with a sickle or scythe of Father Time, a remnant of the agricultural implement of Kronos Saturn, and his aged appearance represents the waning of the old year with the birth of the new. He was a god of wealth, and the temple of Saturn in the Roman Forum housed the state treasury. Under Saturn's rule, humans supposedly enjoyed a bountiful time of fruitful harvests. The revelries of Saturnalia were supposed to reflect the conditions of the lost mythical Golden Age, not all of them desirable except as a temporary release from civilized constraint. He was considered a god of dissolution, renewal, as well as liberation. He was associated with Dis Pater, the god of the underworld. It is only natural that he might be associated with death and decay, and the modern image of the Grim Reaper, the personification of death with his scythe or sickle, is copied from Saturn. 3rd century sources indicate that Saturn received gladiatorial offerings during or near Saturnalia, and were sponsored by the funds from the treasury of Saturn. The practice was criticized as a form of human sacrifice. Macrobius says that Dis Pater was placated with human heads, and Saturn with sacrificial victims consisting of men. These figurines that were exchanged as gift sigillaria during the Saturnalia may have represented token substitutes. And of course, we know Christmas came from Saturnalia, so we can see what the original presents actually represented. Saturn has also been linked to the wrathful manifestation of the Hindu god Shiva, and one of the main wrathful deities of esoteric Buddhism. Saturn and this deity are both associated with the color black, associated with time. Both are underworld deities, and both have a clear association with death. The planet Saturn was also associated with the underworld in the specific sense that it is seen as the son of night. In ancient Mesopotamian astronomy, Saturn was strangely associated with the sun, but was also believed to be black in color. Hence, in a way, to them it was a black sun. This idea was also linked to a myth concerning Shamash, the Babylonian sun god, known elsewhere as Utu, who sometimes traveled beneath the earth, the kingdom of the underworld, to fulfill his function as the supreme judge of the dead. Ptolemy said that the people living throughout southern Asia revered the planet Venus as Isis, and Saturn as Mithras Helios. Mithras, along with Abraxas, the Gnostic deity, were both linked to the sun as well as Saturn. Abraxas and Mithras both are associated with the sun in that the letters of their name add up to 365, the number of days in a year. The earliest Gnostic sects ascribed the work of creation to angels. Irenaeus tells of the system of Simon Magus, of the system of Menerander, of the system of Saturnius, in which the number of these angels is reckoned as 7. In the Sethian and Ophite systems, which have many affinities with the doctrine of Valentinus, the making of the world is ascribed to a company of 7 archons, their chief being Yaldabaoth. In the Apocryphon of John, found in the Nag Hammadi library, the Gnostic Abraxas becomes Samael, who is the demiurge, Yaldabaoth. One of Samael's greatest roles in Jewish lore is that of the main archangel of death. As an angel, Samael resides in the seventh heaven. It is probable these seven angels or archons are the seven planets, and the seventh is Saturn. So, Abraxas becomes Samael, who resides in Saturn. Mithra, in several depictions, is shown with many characteristics of Saturn, as we see here. In the book The Age of Constantine the Great by Jacob Burckhardt, it describes Mithras as being the one who leads the souls of men through a ladder to escape this world. It also describes how the initiates go through torture to become initiated or enlightened. In Egypt, Saturn is referred to as Horus the Bull, that is, star of the sun. The idea of the sun god descending to the underworld is familiar to Egypt, with Ra journeying there every night on his barge, donning the appearance of a ram as he does so. In Egypt, the night sun is Osiris, the fertility god of the underworld. The Mayans also believed the sun descended and journeyed through the underworld, taking the form of the night sun in the form of a jaguar, god of the underworld. The idea of a night sun or dark sun can also be found in the religious mythos of antiquity. In Greece, it is Dionysus, the chthonic mystery god usually remembered as a god of wine, who was apparently described as a night sun by Plutarch. Dionysus was sometimes associated with the sun by Orpheus. One possible explanation for why ancients across cultures associated the sun with Saturn is the hypothesis that the Phoebe ring was much more luminous in a previous time, making Saturn's ring visible to the naked eye from Earth, and if it was much more visible, the ring would be as large as the moon, as viewed from Earth. Quote, ancient astronomers assigned specific colors to each of the seven planets. The color assigned to Saturn remains a distinct problem, black. The Babylonians regularly described it as black, as did ancient Indian and Greco-Roman and medieval Jewish writers. The reconstruction offered of the newly discovered Phoebe ring is thus of immense interest not only for modern astronomers but for those studying the thought processes of their ancient counterparts. As visualized, a ring of light surrounds a gigantic black space, within which the planet itself appears only as a dot of brightness at the center. This could be why ancient observers regarded Saturn as black. Perceiving the ring as the perimeter of the planet, the body of the object would appear to be black. Could the amount of dust in the Phoebe ring have been considerably larger in the past? Not only would this successfully account for the Babylonian characterization of Saturn as black, it might also shed light on some other curious traditions. The Greek historian Diodorus of Sicily stated that the ancient Babylonian astronomers deemed Saturn the most conspicuous of the planets. These astronomers linked the planet to the sun, a puzzling fact that has exercised scholars' minds for a century. Saturn was called the planet of the sun god Shamash by the Babylonians, followed by writers in the Greek world, the star of Helios, and in India, the son of the sun. The ring, greater than the moon if visible, could have prompted the Babylonian perception of Saturn both as a nocturnal sun and as black." Unquote. If this is the case, and the planet Saturn in the night sky looked like a giant circle with a dot in the middle, it would have appeared as a giant eye in the sky, visible only when the sun set, causing them to think that the sun had descended into the dark underworld of the night sky. Saturn was the sun god ever watching, day and night. In Saturn Kronos' mythology, he is famous for eating his children, so that a prophecy would not come true that one of them would replace him. Zeus succeeded in being hidden away and replaced him. Since we know Satan is represented as Zeus, we can see that the pagan side is retelling a biblical story, because Shemyaza was the leader and most powerful angel that reigned in the supposed Atlantean Golden Age, when fallen angels taught men many secrets and technology, as told in the Book of Enoch, before God sent the flood and imprisoned him in the underworld bottomless pit he's in now. We see that the sun god Ra was represented with a ram's head as he descended into the underworld. Let's quote now from Manly P. Hall, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Quote, Pan was a composite creature, the upper part, with the exception of his horns, being human, and the lower part in the form of a goat. The pipes of Pan signify the natural harmony of the spheres, and the god himself is a symbol of Saturn, because this planet is enthroned in Capricorn, whose emblem is a goat. Unquote. Pan is also linked to another sun god emblem. Quote, but there is yet more to the shape of the obelisk. Egyptian legend holds that the god Osiris was killed and that his sexual shaft was cut into 14 pieces. The obelisk represents Osiris's male phallus. Later, as the paganism of the Chaldeans began to take hold in the Middle East, the obelisk was recognized as the male shaft of Baal, which means Lord. Later still in the Greek mystery religion, Pan, the goat god and god of sexual sensuality, was often represented by an obelisk, unquote, and that is a quote from Masonic and Occult Symbols illustrated by Dr. Kathy Burns. The Carthaginian god Baal Haman is equated to Kronos, Saturn. We saw earlier how in Rome, gladiatorial events where the killing of people in the gladiatorial arena, many of them being Christians, were sacrifices to Saturn. Quote, the Carthaginians offered as a sacrifice 200 sons of the nobility, and no fewer than 300 more voluntarily offered up themselves. There was a brazen statue of Saturn with the hands extended, but so inclined towards the earth that the boy who was laid upon them to be sacrificed should slip off, and so falling headlong into a deep fiery furnace. Diodorus of Sicily. Cleotarchus also mentions this. Quote, there stands in their midst a bronze statue of Kronos, its hands extended over a bronze brazier, the flames of which engulf the child. When the flames fall upon the body, the limbs contract, and the open mouth seems almost to be laughing until the contracted body slips quietly into the brazier. Thus it is that the grin is known as the sardonic laughter, since they die laughing, unquote. Plutarch also mentions this practice. Saturn and the Black Cube are also associated with the horned deity Baphomet. In 1856, occultist Eliphas Levi drew the first depiction of Baphomet that took the form of a hermaphrodite, half human, half goat, which was adopted by the 1910 Devil tarot card. Eliphas' drawing showed Baphomet perched on top of a black cube. In the Eliphas-inspired Devil tarot card, a man and woman are shown chained to a black cube, with Baphomet authoritatively perched on top. This carries on the theme of the black cube as a form of imprisonment. Interestingly, the Greco-Roman goddess Cybele was a hermaphrodite, and her name is connected to the word cube. This may give a clue as to Baphomet's identity. Both Cybele and Baphomet are hermaphrodite and are connected to the cube. And we see that the priests of the cult of Cybele were male eunuchs. They would castrate themselves in the midst of sexual pleasure as a means of symbolically offering up their fertility to the mother goddess. Important to the worship of Cybele was Attis, the Phrygian god of vegetation, also considered a resurrection god similar to the Greek Adonis. Supposedly Attis was Cybele's lover. According to some sources, they claim him to be her son. Unfortunately, he fell in love with a mortal and chose to marry. According to one story, on the day of their wedding banquet, the irate and jealous goddess apparently struck panic into those who attended the wedding. Afraid for his own safety, the frightened groom fled to nearby mountains, where he gradually became insane, eventually committing suicide, but not before castrating himself. The myth claims that he would return to life during the yearly rebirth of vegetation, thus identifying Attis as an early dying and rising god figure. Zeus was also said to have castrated Saturn when he overthrew him. Saturn was often depicted as wearing a red cloak, which symbolized his castration and the blood loss from that. Osiris, Pan, Attis, Cybele, Saturn, all of these seem to be depicting a castration, and the obelisk is a representation of this. As we get further into this video, it will become apparent that they are trying to resurrect Saturn so that he can reign again. Coincidentally, we see George Washington with a red cloak, also on top of a black cube. The Washington Monument, named after him, is an obelisk, and we see statues of him in the Baphomet pose. Shiva, which we have also linked to Saturn, is also depicted as half male, half female. Carl Jung also associates Abraxas with Baphomet as well as the Demiurge and Shiva. The Templars also associated the god, their secret god, with Abraxas, which was the same as Baphomet, and depictions of it show him with a red cross with a rose in the center, the Rose and Cross organization. The first man to draw the Baphomet was Eliphas Levi, and he says that the mediator and great magical agent is represented as the Baphomet of the Templars and is the double tail of the serpent which forms the legs of the solar cock of Abraxas. Depictions of this deity are taken from ancient drawings of Osiris, linking him again to this same deity. Quote, Eliphas Levi includes the Temple of Solomon among the 7 wonders of the world, giving it the place occupied by the Lighthouse of Alexandria. It was designed and constructed during the reign of Ptolemy. Fires were lighted in the top of it and could be seen for miles out at sea. Being the tallest of all the wonders, it was naturally assigned to Saturn, the father of the gods and the true illuminator of all humanity. Unquote. Manly P. Hall, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Solomon, despite being a wise man, was seduced into false god worship, and his evil deeds eventually led to the breaking up of God's land of Israel. His name in English is the merging of the opposites sol, sun, with moon, mon. Symbolically, when they come together, they produce the product of Horus, the Antichrist child. Modern English is an occult, magical language in many ways. In Hebrew, that association of sun and moon in his name is not there. Likewise, neither is the following: Israel, Isis, Ra, El. El is Saturn. The sun, the moon, and Saturn. Neither is the following: the word sun meaning a male child, with sun meaning, well, the bright sun in the sky. This is all consequences from Babel, conflating God's land and people with this mystery religion, and Nimrod, the sun god, with the Messiah, son of God. Back to Solomon and the Antichrist. 1 Kings 10:14 says, quote, the weight of gold which Solomon received every year was 666 talents of gold, unquote. The only other place 666 occurs is the mark of the beast in Revelation, which the Antichrist enacts on everybody to buy and sell. 1 Kings 11:7 says that Solomon built a sacrificial place for Shamash and for Moloch. It is no wonder that Solomon became associated with Saturn himself. We see in Acts 7:43, it says, Yea, ye took up the tabernacle of Moloch, and the star of your god Remphan, figures which ye made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon, unquote. Amos 5:26 also says, You have bore the tabernacle of Moloch, and Kayun your images, the star of your god which ye made for yourselves. We see a clear association with a star and Moloch. What is this tent of Moloch and the star of Remphan and Kayun? In the book, The History and Practice of Magic, Volume 2, it says the six-pointed star is called the Talisman of Saturn. It is also referred to as the Seal of Solomon. We quote from that book, "On the first face is engraved with a diamond-pointed burin the image of a scythe enclosed in a pentagram or a five-pointed star. On the other side is engraved a bull's head enclosed in a six-pointed star, and surrounded by letters composing the name Rempha, the planetary genus of Saturn according to the alphabet of the Magi." Unquote. In the book, The Lesser Key of Solomon, it is said that Solomon uses a ring to control demons. It is likely he was calling on the ringed planet of Saturn. We see Eliphas Levi drawing the as above, so below God, the merged opposites of the good God and the evil God, as one, as the six-pointed star. According to Masonic and occult symbols illustrated, Moloch is Saturn. Quote, "Osiris, a sun deity represented by horns, and his emblem was a serpent, united with his sister Isis, which resulted in the birth of Horus, the Egyptian god of the dead, as well as a sun god. Osiris is known by many names. In Thrace, Greece, he is known as Dionysus, the god of pleasures, partying, and wine. The Phrygians know Osiris as Sabazius, which was represented by horns, and his emblem was a serpent. The centaur, Orion, Saturn, Nimrod, Hermes, Prometheus, Apollo, Tammuz, Attis, Shiva, and Moloch." Unquote. Of course, Moloch and Saturn also share the attributes of slaughtering and devouring children, a detestable practice condemned by the Bible. I will put up the quotes now. This Saturnian worship has been veiled and hidden away, but is strong in many streams of thought. It has been carried down through the mystery school religions, one of which is alchemy. The great work is a goal in alchemy, and it's the journey to become godlike and make something out of nothing. It is initiated with the first step being the alchemical black sun. The black sun is the first stage in the achievement of enlightenment or immortality, which is accomplished through the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is known for making lead into gold, and the planetary association of Saturn to metal is lead. The planetary association with Sun is gold, so turning Saturn into the Sun is the alchemical process accomplished by the Philosopher's Stone. I would like to note here that P.D. Newman, a Free M author, links the Philosopher's Stone to DMT and the Acacia, which will become important as we move through this presentation. The alchemical soul Niger symbolized putrefaction, dissolution, and a certain sense of death. It is not for nothing that the cycle of the sun itself is a part of a network of myths concerning journeys to the underworld, the discovery of the dark underbelly of life itself. We may even hark back to the fall of Lucifer in a certain sense. Doreen Valentine from Wicca herself relates the fall of Lucifer to the cycle of the sun, this fall being reenacted every year, by, after rising to its height in the midsummer, falling from said heights to hide in the realms below. Incidentally, Valentine even admitted in private correspondences to the Luciferian Michael Howard that she believed Lucifer to be the true name of the god of the old religion, presumably referring to the horned god of Wicca. Of course, this is not to say that the black sun is necessarily a symbol of Lucifer, though the nocturnal sun motif can be connected to certain views about Lucifer and his fall, even though, strictly speaking, Lucifer is the spirit of the morning star. The black sun, or soul Niger in alchemy, is a sign that points to the light that awaits those who dive into darkness, into the underworld, in pursuit of spiritual enlightenment. We quote from Symbolism of Free M by Mackey, written in 1869. For instance, in the mysteries of Mithras in Persia, there were 7 stages or degrees of initiation. There was erected in the temples, or rather caves, for it was in them that the initiation was conducted, a high ladder of 7 steps, or gates, each of which was dedicated to one of the planets, which was typified by one of the metals, the topmost step representing the sun, so that beginning at the bottom we have Saturn represented by lead, and the top sun by gold, unquote. This again is the alchemical goal of turning lead into gold, Saturn into the sun. Let's look at another mystery school stream, that is Kabbalah. In Kabbalah, Saturn and knowledge are associated, along with a hermaphroditic deity. Quote, in Jewish Kabbalah, Saturn is associated with the 3rd sphere Binah, which represents understanding and the feminine aspect of God. In Kabbalah, Saturn is linked with the concept of Shekinah. This divine feminine presence dwells within the physical world. According to Kabbalistic tradition, Binah is the channel through which the divine energy of wisdom and understanding flows into the world. Saturn, the planet associated with Binah, represents the energy's strict and structured aspect. The myth of Saturn in Kabbalah also emphasizes the importance of self-discipline and humility. This is because Saturn represents the need to accept and work within the limits and boundaries of the physical. It represents the importance of balancing God's masculine and feminine aspects, and the need to integrate the limitations and structures of the physical world with the limitless potential of the spiritual realm. It also emphasizes the idea of spiritual discipline and the importance of submitting oneself to a higher power to achieve true understanding and enlightenment, unquote. We quote from The Secrets of the Last Waters, the Zohar 3. The child opened the discussion with the verse, quote, the wise man, his eyes are in his head, while the fool walks in darkness, unquote, Ecclesiastes 2:14. Why does it say that the eyes are in his head? Are the eyes of a man in any other place? Rather, the meaning of the verse is this: it has been taught that a man should not walk 4 cubits with an uncovered head. What is the reason? Since the Shekinah rests upon his head, and a wise man's thoughts and visions are in his head. King Solomon alluded to the 3rd eye when he said a wise man's eyes are in his head and show him the light. The meaning of his words are quite clear, for he didn't mean that a fool is literally blind, rather that he is lacking spiritual vision, which a wise man has. The Zohar comments by first stating that it is obvious that the eyes are in or on the head. What one should understand is that contained within our head are all of our holy thoughts and spiritual visions imbued by God, and thus God's divine presence, the Shekinah, hovers over the head, unquote, and this is why they wear this kippah, this hat. Metatron's cube is a 3-dimensional hexagram. This angel, Metatron, is mentioned in apocryphal texts, including the 2nd book of Enoch and the book of Palaces, which rank Metatron second only to the God of the Bible in the hierarchy of spiritual beings. The derivation of Metatron's cube from the Tree of Life, which the Talmud states was excluded from human experience during the exile from Eden, has led many scholars to portray Metatron as the means by which humanity was given knowledge of the Most High God, presumably implying the study of Metatron's cube would be necessary to understand the Tree of Life. Within this cube, many other shapes can be found, including versions of the 5 Platonic solids. In early Kabbalistic scriptures, Metatron supposedly forms the cube from his soul. We quote now from the Book of Concealed Mystery. Quote, the great dragon, which is in the sea and is the sea serpent, and thence have formed 400 desirable worlds. And this dragon hath in his head a nostril, in order that he might receive influence, and in himself he contains all other dragons, concerning which is said, Thou hast broken the heads of the dragons upon the waters. His tail is in his head, that is, he holdeth his tail in his mouth, in order that he may form a circle, since he is said to encompass holiness. Here is the origin of the well-known symbol of a serpent holding his tail in his mouth, like a circle, the serpent of Saturn." Unquote. Thus associating Saturn with this great serpent, which encompasses the universe, that we had talked about earlier as well with Saturn. And here we see a syncretism between these mystery school religions. The Eye of Horus is a cross-section of the brain where the third eye resides. The Eastern religions have the chakras. The highest chakra in the forehead is where Saturn is, and they snake their way up through the Kundalini serpent force up to the third eye, which is the same as the Kabbalistic tree of life when applied to the human body. In India, Shiva is seen with a serpent around his neck and a dot on his third eye. The same can be seen for the Buddha, who also has a dot on the third eye. And the Great Pyramids are laid out to Orion's belt, which also is the same shape as the DMT molecule, which is produced in the third eye. And again, Orion is a representation of Osiris. The pharaohs also have a serpent coming out of the third eye. The Rose and Cross organization, as well as the Free M's, also hold acacia as a sacred plant, and so does alchemy, who considers it the prima materia, and the acacia contains a high amount of DMT, which again is produced in the pineal gland. It should therefore be no surprise that the Kabbalistic Jews put a black cube of Saturn on their forehead where the third eye resides. Quote, "In Kabbalah, the third eye is associated with the head tefillin, which the Torah commands be placed between your eyes. Despite this, we do not put the tefillin between our eyes, but atop our head above the hairline. This alludes to the fact that the head tefillin is about opening up our third eye, buried deeper in our brains. Science has shed some incredible light on this subject. Deep in our brains is a small organ called the pineal gland. It releases the sleep hormone melatonin and has been found to contain DMT, dimethyltryptamine, a chemical that causes hallucinations and visions." Jewish mysticism and magic also ascribe the highest talisman's powers in a magic square to Saturn, which they associate with God through numerology. And again, this is the rabbinic and Kabbalistic Judaism, not actually biblical Judaism. Quote, "Talisman, a figure either carved in metal or stone, or delineated on parchment or paper, made with superstitious ceremonies under what was supposed to be special influence of the planetary bodies, and believed to possess occult powers of protecting the maker or possessors from danger. The figure in the text is a talisman, and among the Orientals no talisman was more sacred than this one, where the 9 digits are so disposed to make 15 each way. The Arabians called it Za'al, which was the name of the planet Saturn. The Kabbalists esteemed it because 15 was the numerical power of the letters composing the word Jah, which is one of the names of God." And that's a quote from Symbolism of Free M by Mackey from 1869. There is also a lot of overlap between Kabbalah, alchemy, and Islam. Quote, "The specification of the design of the seal of Solomon as a hexagram seems to arise from a medieval Arab tradition, and most scholars assume the symbol entered the Kabbalistic tradition of medieval Spain and Arabic literature. Hexagrams feature prominently in Jewish esoteric literature from the early medieval period, and it has been hypothesized that the tradition of Solomon's seal may possibly predate Islam and date to the early rabbinical esoteric tradition or to early alchemy in Hellenistic Judaism in 3rd century Egypt. In the tradition of the as above, so below, the macrocosm is a mirror of the microcosm. The tree of life can also be placed upon the planets as well as the human body, and there are 7 levels, which translates in Islam and Kabbalistic Judaism to 7 heavens reaching up to God. Ptolemy was the one who popularized these 7 classical planets. He was also a mathematician and geographer, and he is the one that came up with a nautical mile. Interestingly, between Jerusalem and Mecca, where the black cube is that the Islamists pray to 5 times a day, is exactly 666 nautical miles. The Quran itself says that Allah's seat of his throne is in the 7th heaven, and during the night he comes down to the 1st heaven, and in the Ptolemaic order of the spheres, the moon is the 1st heaven and Saturn is the 7th heaven. Thus, it seems like the Quran is saying Allah resides in Saturn and then comes down to the moon at nighttime. The moon features prominently in a lot of Islamic art and architecture, and they use a purely lunar calendar as well. The Byzantine Empire popularized the crescent moon with a star, and the star had a combination of 8, 6, and 5 points. We've seen the hexagram representing Saturn already, having 6 points. It's also represented as a star with 8 points because the 8-pointed star represents a tesseract, which is a higher dimensional cube. Saturn is also seen with an 8-spoked wheel representing the wheel of time that he controls. When the Muslims gather in Mecca, they circle around the black cube. You can see this again as a symbol of alchemy, where we have the cube in the middle and the circle on the outside. Squaring the circle is a famous symbol in alchemy, and is also representative of Free-M, the square and the compass. In fact, in Free-M lodges, it is more like a temple, and their altars are cubic. And it is said that the initiate is likened into a rough stone that has to be made into a perfect cube. While most of the groups that we've talked about worship Saturn in a occulted or hidden way, there is one organization that is outright about their worship of Saturn. The beast Aleister Crowley left a heritage of Thelema followers, and one of them was the Brotherhood of Saturn. This magical order was similar to the other occult groups, whether it be New Age, Free-M, or Thelema. They all revolve around the idea of mastery of occult knowledge in order to achieve and evolve oneself in a series of steps or rituals. The Brotherhood of Saturn incorporates 33 steps to achieve the full spectrum of enlightenment, similar to the Scottish Rite of Free-M, who also incorporate 33 degrees. The end of the path for a member of the Brotherhood of Saturn is self-deification, an important concept in Thelema, making themselves godlike. The Brotherhood established Saturn as the planet of choice because the ancients would focus on polar opposites, and at the time they saw Saturn as the outermost planet, furthest from the light of the sun, effectively making it the dark side, hence the reason we see the black cube. The darkness is necessary in order for there to be light. As Stephen E. Flowers, Ph.D., points out in his book, Lores of the Left-Hand Path, quote, Saturnian teachings give primacy to darkness. Darkness is said to precede light and to provide a matrix for the manifestation of the light. Without darkness, there is no light. The dualism of the Fraternitas Saturni, FS, does not seek to destroy one pole in favor of the other, but rather it seeks to go beyond the polarities through experience of both extremes, unquote. The book goes on to reveal that the zodiacal sign of Aquarius is ruled by the planetary force of Saturn. The age of Aquarius is important to the occult because that is the new age of man, or as Crowley defined it, the Aeon of Horus. Many occult organizations carry on this Saturnian illumination and quest to return the old god back to rule another so-called Golden Age. The Order of the Skull and Bones is one such organization. Alexandria Robbins, herself a member of another of Yale's secret societies, interviewed more than 100 bonesmen, and wrote about the order's rituals in her book, The Secrets of the Tomb, Skull and Bones, the Ivy League, and the Hidden Paths of Power. Quote, Lucifer, as the morning star, isn't merely the fallen angel Lucifer, but also the brother of Christ. Saturn, in its highest octave, is deepest wisdom incarnate, concerning maturation via suffering. Salvation awaits even behind his dark gate, unquote. And we see another tieback to the Mithric illumination rituals that concerned even torture of its members to reach initiation and illumination. The FS was founded by Gregor A. Gregoris Eugene Grosch as its Grand Master. It describes his cult's belief that Saturn and the Sun are two different avenues to salvation, and both involve the path of suffering. One can see a nod to the Saturnian god of the underworld, Osiris, in the Skull and Bones logo. They also want to achieve what Crowley called the Age of Horus. Quote, An X is an ancient symbol for change or transformation, long associated in medieval and Renaissance art with the coming of the Masonic Messiah, who shall make all things new, unquote. Jim Tresner, 33 Degree M, Scottish Rite Journal. Quote, Osiris clearly played a double role. He was both a god of fertility and the embodiment of the dead and resurrected king. This dual role was in turn combined with the Egyptian concept of divine kingship. The king at death became Osiris, god of the underworld, and the dead king's son, the living king, was identified with Horus. Osiris and Horus were father and son. The goddess Isis was the mother of the king, and was thus the mother of Horus and the consort of Osiris. The god Seth was considered the murderer of Osiris and the adversary of Horus. And Osiris is seen making the X with his hands across the chest. We also see it in the Skull and Bones logo, as well as in the Vatican with their XP. And the Skull and Bones number is 322. What do we see in Genesis 3:22? Then the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us, in knowing good and evil. Now lest he reach out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat, and live forever. Grosch, the founder of FS, wrote a letter to Crowley in 1926 that said, quote, We are fully aware that this is a grave undertaking to revive the old Saturnian lodge of the Middle Ages, which disappeared centuries ago. We also know that on this steep path and through hard ordeals we will have to face Saturnus, the guardian of the threshold. By the help of cosmic glyphs, however, we have succeeded in magically harmonizing ourselves with Saturnian intelligences in such a way that we are able to say already today that at present we are the only magical lodge in Germany today working in any practical way except some secret Jewish lodges concerning which we have no details. Now we ask you, highly honored Master, to lend us your benevolence and let us have your spiritual support, as I personally have the conviction that we will succeed in creating a network of Saturnian lodges subordinated to us in Germany within a fairly short time. We would be doubly thankful to you. Crowley himself said this of the order, quote, The spiritual aims of the Brotherhood lie in the direction of mysticism, Rosicrucian sciences, alchemy, esoteric astrology, as well as a scientific study of the whole of occultism, and the penetration of all the religious philosophies by magical ceremonies and the holy traditional rituals to focus itself upon the higher octave of Saturn, as aspired to in esoteric astrology and religious philosophy. Saturn, as the guardian of the threshold, as the highest planetary intelligence of this solar system, is considered the spiritual leader, unquote. Stephen E. Flowers, Ph.D., in his book Fire and Ice, The History, Structure, and Rituals of Germany's Most Influential Modern Magical Order, the Brotherhood of Saturn, says, quote, in the Saturn Gnosis, the planet and archetype of Saturnus is the focal point for the manifestation of the demiurge. This demiurge is identified with Lucifer, the bearer of light, as the higher octave of Saturn. In this capacity, it is the guardian of the threshold to higher initiation and being. Saturnus is the great judge and manifests justice. He also brings reason and intelligence, and governs all standards of weights, measurements, and number. He is the Lord of the seven dwellings, and governor of the revealed world, and Lord over life and death, and over light and darkness. Saturnus is seen as the breaker of cosmic order and unity. Thus, he instituted death, causing regeneration and change to come into being. One of the ways in which he broke the cosmic order was in the revelation of divine secrets to mankind. For this he was punished. Thus, in many ways, Saturnus is identical with Prometheus of Greek tradition, and is certainly to be identified as well with the serpent of paradise. This demiurge Saturnus is identified with the number 666. He is the beast 666, manifest in the man or men 666, and in the living center of the sun, unquote. The precession of the equinoxes heralds the coming of the age of Aquarius. This is what the New Age movement is all about. Whether they know it or not, they are participating in Saturnian worship. The Saturnian brotherhoods believe their deity, the Saturnian sphere, rules the New Age, that the demiurge, Saturnus, Lucifer, guides the coming Aquarian age. According to Saturnian cosmology, the increasing cries, chaos, and confusion of today's world is mainly due to the convergence of two competing and conflicting aeonic streams, the incoming Aquarian and outgoing Piscean. It is the emerging Saturno-Uranian spirit and its elect's great task to bring a new order out of this chaos. We quote from Fleshing Out Skull and Bones, Investigations into America's Most Powerful Secret Society, quote, the Order of 322 is a multi-generational cult that believes in the power of death to bring about change. A group of zeitgeists initiates believes that the end justifies the means and uses massive deaths, contrived wars, revolutions, etc. to feed their necromancy, unquote. Probably their most famous member was George H.W. Bush, who was president when the events of September 11 happened. That event was instrumental in bringing about a new order. It caused massive change in the laws of the United States, as well as multiple wars that lasted for decades across the Middle East. His great-grandfather was a funder of the Nazi regime. The FS and the Brotherhood of Saturn came up into being right before the Nazis took power. The Nazis themselves were brought to power from Saturnian secret societies and lore. Peter Moon tells us in his book The Black Sun on page 172, quote, the Vril Society began around the same time as the Thule Society, when Karl Husfer founded the Brothers of the Light. This organization is sometimes referred to as the Luminous Lodge. This group was eventually renamed the Vril Gesellschaft, as it rose in prominence and united three major societies, the Lords of the Black Stone having emerged from the Teutonic Order in 1917, the Black Knights of the Thule Society, the Black Sun, later identified as the elite of Heinrich Himmler's SS, whereas the Thule Society ended up focusing primarily upon materialistic and political agendas. The Vril Society put its attention on the other side. A local medium named Maria Orsic began getting messages in an unknown language and couldn't transcribe them, so began working with key members of these societies. They discovered the messages were coming from a, quote, Sumerian empire. It revealed this alien race had two classes, the Aryan or master race and a lower subservient race. They said the Aryans began to colonize our solar system, and when they came to Earth, they were known as the Sumerians. It was said there were two factions, one which followed the Golden Sun, and the other the Black Sun. One of these factions supposedly founded their new habitation within the Earth, at a place called Agaratha. The second supposedly created a new place of initiation at Shambhala. According to Peter Moon in his book The Black Sun, the ultimate concept of Thule is well represented in the myth of it as the capital city or center of Hyperborea, a word which literally means beyond the poles. Being beyond the poles, it is outside of this dimension. Thule, being in the center, is positioned as the source of all life on Earth. In Greek mythology, Pythagoras was taught sacred geometry by Apollo, a god who was identified as a resident of Hyperborea. In Pythagorean teachings, the Earth itself geometrically unfolds from a void in the center. This void has been recognized by many ancient groups, including the Sumerians, as the Black Sun. In this sense, Thule is synonymous with this Black Sun. The word swastika itself means source among other definitions, and represents eternal cause or the fountain of creation. The name Thule refers to the capital of the legendary polar country Hyperborea. In Litton's The Coming Race, the subterranean people used the Vril Force to operate and govern the world. This book was instrumental in influencing the doctrine of the Nazi theology and belief system. Quote, at one point the narrator concludes that the Vril are descended from the same ancestors as the great Aryan family, from which, in varied streams, has flowed the dominant civilization of the world. The Vril force, or Vril energy, was said to be derived from the Black Sun, a ball of prima materia which supposedly exists in the center of the Earth, giving light to the Vrila, and putting out radiation in the form of Vril. The Vril Society believed the Aryans were the actual biological ancestors of the Black Sun. In a discussion of the 28th degree, called Night of the Sun, Albert Pike said, quote, this agent, partially revealed by the blind guesses of the disciples of Mesmer, is precisely what the adepts of the Middle Ages called the elementary matter of the great work. The Gnostics held that it composed the igneous body of the Holy Spirit, and it was adored in the secret rites of the Shabbat or the Temple, under the hieroglyphic figure of the Baphomet, or the hermaphroditic goat of Mendes, unquote. The idea of mutation and transformation into a higher form of a God-man was envisioned through the Vril, and in Bueller-Lytton's The Coming Race. Lytton himself was an initiate of the Rosicrucians and was very well versed in the arcane esoteric philosophies. Lytton also influenced Theosophy's founder, Blavatsky. The radical ideas of Madame Blavatsky concerning root races and the emergence of a spiritually developed type of human being in the Aquarian Age were avidly accepted by the 19th century German nationalists who mixed theosophical occultism with anti-Semitism and the doctrine of the racial supremacy of the Aryan or Indo-European peoples. In her book, The Secret Doctrine, she says that the Jews worshipped the sun. She also says in her book, Isis Unveiled, that it is the planet Saturn which the Jews actually worship, we once again see the Sun and Saturn being connected to one another and to the God of the Bible by these occultists. Another theosophist, Alice Bailey, says in her book, The Externalizing the Mysteries, quote, "The decision to release the Shambhala force during this century into direct contact with the human kingdom is one of the final and most compelling acts of preparation for the New Age. The Shambhala force is destructive and ejective, inspiring new understanding of the plan. It is this force which will bring about the tremendous crisis, the initiation of the race into the mysteries of the ages." Unquote. We quote from her again. "Thus a great and new movement is proceeding, and a tremendously increased interplay and interaction is taking place. This will go on until the year 2025. During the years intervening between now and then, very great changes will be seen taking place. And at the great General Assembly of the Hierarchy, held as usual every century, in 2025 the date in all probability will be set for the first stage of the externalization of the hierarchy. The present cycle, from now until that date, is called technically the stage of the Forerunner. It is preparatory in nature, testing in its methods, and intended to be revolutionary in its techniques and results. You can see, therefore, that koans, masters, initiates, world disciples, and aspirants affiliated with the hierarchy are all at this time passing through a cycle of great activity." Unquote. In her book, Esoteric Astrology, Alice Bailey says, quote, "Saturn, Shiva, and Jehovah are one," unquote, from page 668. There are many people that are also theorizing that the end of this Yuga, the Kali Yuga, will occur in 2025 as well. And it describes this period when the world's soul is black and everything deteriorates into all kinds of degeneracy. Within the Nazis, there is a lot of Saturnian symbolism. The Nazi salute was fashioned after the Roman salute, and some have theorized that it symbolically implicates the sun being occulted, where Saturn is thus reinstated to reign in this golden age, the Fourth Reich. The Nazi black sun wheel was designed on the floor of Himmler's castle, the site of major Nazi SS occult rituals. There was a race between nations to be the first to detonate a nuclear device. Had the Nazis succeeded in doing that first, they likely would have won the war. They were working on the program, and their uranium machine used black cubes of uranium as the fissible material. America, of course, won that race. Dr. Oppenheimer quoted Shiva after detonating the first. Quote, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Unquote. Many see this achievement as the ultimate alchemical process, where the black, heavy, dense material of uranium is turned into the light, pure energy and heat of the nuclear explosion. The proverbial lead into gold, Saturn into the sun. In Poland, the concentration camps were arranged in a pentagram. In the center contained a sacred altar to the mother goddess, Cybele. During the war, of course, Italy was aligned with the Nazis, and the Roman Catholics had positive association with Germany and the Nazis. And of course, within the Catholic Church, we have a plethora of black sun and golden sun symbolism. IHS, the H is stylized as Saturn, while the XP is reminiscent of that 322 organization we saw earlier, and is stylized in the shape of a hexagram. The four-pointed Templar cross and the eight-pointed star are both symbols for the sun god Shamash. If you look at the Vatican from a bird's eye view, you see the eight-pointed star in the middle. We've seen that representing both the sun god and Saturn, with an obelisk in the middle, the shaft of Saturn. fashioned in a keyhole shape with the phallus of Osiris Saturn lining up with the dome or the womb of Isis. When the male and female come together, the Antichrist child is produced. Washington, D.C. has the same layout for the same reason. The keyhole shape is also reminiscent of an ancient pagan practice. From the Hurrians and the Hittites, I will put on screen some pages from the Second Coming of Saturn, where a keyhole shape was dug into the earth to try to resurrect gods in the netherworld. These gods are specifically Saturn to those respective cultures. This 8-pointed symbol on screen here was from Aleister Crowley, which is his chaos symbol. And this 8-stoked wheel that Saturn is sometimes seen holding is the Dharma Chakra of Eastern religion. These 4-pointed crosses and 8-pointed stars are just everywhere within the Vatican and Catholic iconography. The Templars, which we've talked a lot about, were a branch of the Catholic Church, and they are well known for worshipping Abraxas, which is Osiris, which is the Baphomet. When applying the Atbash cipher to Baphomet, the result is Sophia, the Gnostic goddess meaning wisdom. It should be remembered that their patron Saint Bernard had an absolute obsession with Mary and was responsible for her being named the Queen of Heaven and Mother of God. In Rome, Cybele was known as Magna Mater, the Great Mother. Inanna, the Sumerian goddess, was also called the Queen of Heaven, and her symbol was the morning star, Venus, and she also was represented with an 8-pointed star. Jeremiah 7:18 repudiates people who make cakes to the Queen of Heaven. The IVP Bible background and commentary links this to the Babylonian practice of making cakes to Ishtar, which is the same as Inanna. They found molds of these cakes in the 2nd millennium BC in a kitchen at Mary in northeast Syria. It was the Catholic Church that changed the Passover into communion. And look at the shape and symbolism of the communion wafer compared to this sun disk symbolism that is very, very ancient. They even place this communion wafer inside the center of a sun. It was Roman Emperor Constantine, the sun worshipper, who made it a crime to celebrate the seventh-day Sabbath and changed it to Sunday. It is also well known that the quote holiday of Easter is named after Ishtar, which again is Astarte and Inanna, this goddess figure. At which time it is traditional to make hot crossed buns. The communion wafer with all the sun symbolism is quite suspect when you read this about the sun god in Egypt. Quote, "At the temple of Mendes, figures of Osiris were made from wheat paste, were placed in a trough on the day of the murderer's commemoration, then water added for several days. Finally, the mixture was kneaded into a mold of Osiris and taken to the temple and buried. Given the sacramental nature of these cakes, the sacred grain composing them could only be grown in temple fields. All of these sacred rituals were climaxed by the eating of the sacramental God, the Eucharist, by which the celebrants were transformed in their persuasion into replicas of their God-man." Aleister Crowley talked about ascending the Tree of Life, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, using the center pillar. When doing this, it is the shortest route, but you get to a point where there is the abyss you have to cross. He warns that it is guarded by a dweller called Choronzon. Practitioners of Thelema have speculated on this name, that it is very similar to Kronos, with on added at the end, which is a Coptic word for the sun god, Sun and Saturn, and is an expression of Saturn when viewed from below, which is where the abyss leads. Another character in this abyss is Typhon, which gets conflated with the Celtic god Nodens, as well as the Greek titan Atlas and the Bible's Leviathan. Kenneth Grant's book, Aleister Crowley and the Hidden God, says that the sigil of Nodin is a circle with an X in the middle, and he calls this the mark of the beast. The X and the O are analogous to the union of the phallus and the vagina. On page 68 of the Complete Idiot's Guide to Alchemy, we see, quote, "The cipher for the first matter can be shown in two orientations. As a cross inside a circle, it signifies the purified or rectified first matter. If it were shown as an X in a circle, it would have signified the chaotic or unrefined first matter." We then see the prima material being transformed into the spiritual development of lead into gold, symbolized here. And this is the same symbol that the communion wafer is stylized as. As we pointed out before, this 8-pointed star can be a symbol for Shamash, the sun god, but it is also a symbol for Ishtar, also known as Inanna. And she's also represented as a 6-pointed star and is the planet Venus, which we have pointed out makes a 5-pointed star in the sky. So she is associated with the 8-pointed, 6-pointed, and 5-pointed. In her mythology, she was wed to Tammuz and was said to rescue him from the underworld. She was associated with the planet Venus, and due to astrological reasons, this is why she is said to descend to the underworld and return again, just like the Sun and Saturn. And like Saturn, she is said to have a male form, and through syncretism, Ishtar is also associated with the same god as Attar, which is a male god. Attar is also the same god as Ninurta, Saturn. We quote about her from the Dictionary of Deities and Demons, quote, "Ishtar reminds us of Gilgamesh, a powerful individual with great energy who always remains dissatisfied with the allotted role or portion and is constantly driven to go beyond. They seem to be male and female counterparts. The figure who appears under the name of Inanna or Ishtar possesses a number of sharply delineated characteristics. The goddess seems even to exhibit contradictory or conflicting traits. She seems to encompass polar opposites. She is death and life, male and female," unquote. The dying and rising god of Tammuz and Ishtar was adopted by the Greeks and is known as Adonis. This figure was also called Barbelo by the Gnostics, who is also referred to as Mother-Father, and the triple androgynous name. Irenaeus calls her a never-aging aeon in a virginal spirit. She was said to reside in the 8th heaven, and put forth of the Father she was the mother of Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, who was said to have taken possession of the 7th heaven, and proclaimed himself to be the only God. All these cultures seem to be retelling the same story of Ishtar and Tammuz, the archetypal, dying and rising god. Ezekiel 13-16 speaks about abominations where women are seen weeping for Tammuz, and right after that he talks about how they were worshiping the sun towards the east. This is likely the same goddess that is spoken of in Revelation 17, where we see a whore riding the beast, who came from the pit from which the Antichrist, Nimrod Tammuz, arises. Zechariah 5 also describes this woman, called Wickedness, being carried in a basket with a lead cover to prevent her from escaping. She was taken to Shinar and put at the base of a house, which is likely the Tower of Babel, where Nimrod/Tammuz comes from. The Tower of Babel sought to connect the underworld with earth and connect it all the way up to heaven. This is another allegory of what they are trying to unlock and unleash. Like Pandora's box, when it is opened and this mystery religion fully comes on the earth, so does chaos. This mystery religion was propagated at the Tower of Babel, and was resurrected from before the flood when the Watchers came down and taught men sorcery and their snake religion. When Nimrod comes back and is resurrected, he will bring this religion out of the shadows and into the forefront, and he will impose it on the entire world, and God's true remnant will be crushed in the process. It will be a return of the old gods, a return to the pagan practices. And sadly, these pagan practices have already been mingled with the Christian religion. Quote, "It is true in a certain sense that some Catholic rites and ceremonies are a reproduction of those pagan creeds," unquote, the externals of the Catholic Church. Quote, "The retention of the old pagan name of Dies Solis for Sunday is, in a great measure, owing to the union of pagan and Christian sentiment, which was the first day of the week, as recommended by Constantine to his subjects, pagan and Christian alike, as the venerable day of the sun," unquote, History of the Eastern Church. Quote, "It has been charged that Catholicism is overlaid with many pagan incrustations. Catholicism is ready to accept that accusation, and even to make it her boast. The great god Pan is not really dead. He is baptized," unquote, the story of Catholicism. We must note here it was the Roman Catholic Church that changed the Sabbath from the seventh day to the first day, from Saturday to Sunday. We must address a myth here. Many people will say Saturday is named after Saturn, so this means the god of the Old Testament is Saturn, as that is his day of rest, the Sabbath. We must understand the word in Hebrew simply means rest. In the Bible, the days of the week are only identified with numbers, except the seventh is also associated with the Sabbath, again meaning rest, so the seventh day is associated with rest. There is no astrological etymology. It was the pagan nations around Israel that identified planets with the days of the week. The earliest records we have on Jewish writings that name the planets is Hebrew Bereshit Rabbah in the 5th century after Christ. This is well after the Jews were dispersed into the surrounding pagan nations and Rabbinic Judaism became the dominant form, versus Essenic Judaism the Christians aligned with in the 1st century. In Bereshit Rabbah, Saturn is called Shabbatai. But this is far too late to make a connection that the Jews of Jesus' time, before exile, thought Saturday was connected to Saturn. It is far more likely that as they were dispersed, the naming of the planets were influenced by their pagan neighbors. We know the Romans had already associated this day with Saturn, and as Latin became a dominant language, and the Romans, converting officially to Christianity under Constantine, who adopted a 7-day week, they named the 7th day Saturn's Day due to the association they had with Saturn. The only association we have between the Sabbath and Saturn comes from pagan sources, which told of their bias which associated that day with Saturn, or rabbinic, Kabbalistic, Jewish sources several centuries later. Quote, "The Gentiles, of whom the apostles say that they worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, gave the names of their gods to the days of the week. Why do you try to bring in the name of Saturn in connection with the rest of the 7th day enjoined in Scripture, merely because the Gentiles call the day Saturday? The Scripture name for the day is Sabbath, which means rest," unquote. Augustine Contra Frostrum, Book 13.5. The naming scheme of the planets by the Romans is interesting. We have the end of the week, the 7th day, being associated with Saturn. It then starts over at the first of the week with Sun, the Sunday. Similarly, it is interesting that their major festival of the year, Saturnalia, was honoring the god of grain and remembering his golden age. Slaves were treated better, and there was much drinking and gift-giving, which concluded with the festival of Sol Invictus and the New Year celebration of Calends. Just as we see Saturday giving way to Sunday, we have the feast of Saturnalia giving way to the feast of the unconquerable sun. we have the familiar scene of Saturn turning into the sun. And just as God's Sabbath became absorbed into Sunday, the birth of Christ became associated with the festival honoring Saturn and the sun of the Roman Empire through Constantine. It is really no coincidence that the final beast in Revelation and Daniel is associated with the Roman Empire, and the Antichrist who emerges from it is described as changing laws and times. Think the feast of God and the Sabbath here. That 8-spoked wheel also represents the 8 holidays of the pagan nations. Again, we have the 7 feasts of God. 7 plus 1 is 8. 8 is the Sunday, the day after the 7. So again, they're replacing God and what he had planned with the feast with this Saturnian pagan religion. Quote, "For a time, coins and other monuments continued to link Christian doctrines with the worship of the sun, to which Constantine had been previously addicted. But even when this phase came to an end, Roman paganism continued to exert other permanent influences, great and small. The ecclesiastical calendar retains numerous remnants of pre-Christian festivals, notably Christmas, which blends elements including both the feast of Saturnalia and the birthday of Mithra." Unquote. Roman Religion, Encyclopedia Britannica. It is well known that Christ's birthday was not actually December 25, but that was the birth date of the sun god, Sol, Mithras, and many other sun gods around the world, and this makes sense as this was the date of the solstice in the Julian calendar, which was changed by Pope Gregory in 1582 to the Gregorian calendar in use today. But when the change occurred, it shifted the solstice back to the 21st on our calendar. But when they chose that as the day for Christmas, it was the solstice. The reason the solstice is the sun god's birthday is because the sun dies. That is, it is at its lowest point, and from that point forward, it stops getting dimmer and lower in the sky and is reborn as the days get longer and longer, and once again it rises back up in the sky. For more information on this, I would recommend the documentary from 119 Ministries, The Christmas Question, and you'll see how many of the traditions we have originate from Saturnalia and other pagan rites, such as why the colors green and red are used, the mistletoe, holly, Christmas trees, stockings, presents, carols, the Yule log, the 12 days of Christmas, and even Santa Claus and his evil twin Krampus. Our previous videos, particularly the Evil Enoch series, has identified Nimrod and the Tower of Babel incident with spreading the religion of the snake around the world. The mystical, occult, third eye opening, Kabbalistic revamping of the ancient Watcher religion by translating the antediluvian twin tablets with this fallen angel's secret knowledge inscribed on them. Nimrod is the best candidate for the beast who was, and is not, yet will be, the 8th final Antichrist, who was responsible for spreading the Sun and Saturn worship cults all around the world. As we look at this symbology, keep all of this in mind, and at the end of this video, it will all make sense. For now, just look at how Santa is linked with the sun god, Nimrod, Tammuz, and Krampus is linked with Saturn. Again, we have this false dichotomy again. The sun god, Santa Claus, transposed with the evil Saturnian god of the goat, Pan. Evergreens were related to the Dionysic mysteries, along with Hiram Abiff and Osiris. It signifies human immortality and regeneration, and it was the symbol of Attis. And of course, Christmas trees have pine cones. Again, this is a battle for the pineal, which is symbolized as a pine cone, the pineal. And look at the Pope's hat here. It is obviously a pineal, which is what these ancient Assyrian fish gods are harvesting from the Tree of Life, the pineals. And when viewed from the side, this is what the Pope's hat represents. It is a fish mouth, which was originally connected to Mithraism, A poor translation was very popular that translated Dagon into fish. It was later found out that a better translation is grain, but nonetheless, it was very common for people in that era to believe that Dagon was a fish god. Dagon is associated with Qumrabi, El, Kronos. It is all the same god, Saturn. The worship of Saturn has been hidden in plain sight for centuries by this church. One more symbol we'll look at that's used by this church is the double-headed eagle. When you trace this back, it goes all the way back to the Hittite civilization, and it is an emblem for Ninurta, the son of Enlil, which is also Saturn. So this bird is a representation of the son of Saturn, Ninurta. It's been used by the Holy Roman Empire, the House of Habsburg, in the Russians, and the Nazis. This double-headed eagle represents the two heads of Saturn, Saturn and his son. And this is again mirrored in alchemy, where it symbolizes Osiris being raised and illumination. The phoenix is a large, grand bird, much like an eagle or peacock. It is brilliantly colored in reds, purples, and yellows, and is associated with rising sun and fire. In perhaps the earliest instance of the legend, the Egyptians told of the Bennu, a heron bird that is part of the creation myth. The Bennu lived atop a Benben stone, or obelisk, and was worshipped alongside Osiris and Ra. Bennu was seen as an avatar of Osiris, a living symbol of the deity. The solar bird appears on ancient amulets as a symbol of rebirth and immortality, and it was associated with the period of the flooding of the Nile, bringing new wealth and fertility. The Bennu carries the sun out of its slumber each day and returns it by night. Without the Bennu's efforts, there would be no crops and no life. Egyptian alchemists used the Bennu for various rituals. Bennu is ruled by the sun, offering the symbolic value of illumination, self-awareness, time, and clarity. The phoenix is also an alchemical symbol. It represents the changes during chemical reactions and progression through colors, properties of matter, and has to do with the steps of alchemy in the making of the great work or the philosopher's stone. Likewise, Eliphas Levi equates Hermetic, alchemic, and Kabbalistic magic to the image of the phoenix rising in his book, Transcendental Magic. It's easy to see that the Roman Catholic Church would align with an empire that fashioned itself as a resurrection of the Roman Empire, the Nazis. America itself designed its architecture, political system, art, and elements of the capital after the Roman Empire. With the Roman obsession with Saturn, it is no surprise America, mimicking Rome, also associated itself with Saturn. On the dollar bill and the Great Seal, the eagle has 13 arrows, signifying war, and 13 olive leaves signifying peace, the duality. The banner, which again is from the Zeus Aquila, reads, "From Rome's official language of Latin in 13 letters, out of many, equals 1, followed by the hexagram above the Satan eagle, symbolizing Saturn made up of 13 smaller stars. Together they make the 14th star, the star of Saturn. It is the same as the magical capstone on the pyramid, the 14th piece of Osiris that was missing, resurrected from the underworld using magic. The other Latin sayings on the bill are, "He approves of our undertaking," and "New Order of the Ages." Who approves of the undertaking? To take many and make one, into the New Order of the Ages. The motto was coined by Charles Thomson in June 1978, in which he adopted it from a 1st century BC Roman writer called Virgil's Eclogue 4, in which Virgil refers to Cybele, who prophesied the fate of the Roman Empire. Quote, "Justice returns, old Saturn's reign, with a new breed of men sent down from heaven. Only do thou, at the boy's birth, in whom the iron shall cease, the golden age arise. The age's mighty march begins anew. Now come the Virgin, Saturn's reign again. Now from high heaven descends a wondrous race. Thou, on the new-born babe, who shall end that age of iron, bid a golden dawn." Unquote. A new race from heaven to rule over the whole world, a new golden age. This sounds like what the Nazis were trying to accomplish with eugenics and the Aryan race, a race from the star peoples. And it harkens back to Genesis 6:4, when angels mingled with man, making the Nephilim, the days of Noah. After the war, the U.S. brought over hundreds, if not thousands, of Nazi scientists, engineers, and others to aid our technological advances in rocketry and the field of, quote, medicine, or chemical and biological warfare. They were installed in high positions of power in the U.S. Other organizations sprang up after the war, such as NATO, the UN, and the WHO, that carried on the familiar imagery of Saturn and inched us closer to a totalitarian one-world system. Inside the United Nations, in the reception hall, just to the right of the reception desk and close to the Security Council chambers, is a small, windowless room called the Meditation Room. In the middle of this room is a 6.5-ton black altar made of iron ore. It is called the Stone of Light. The Meditation Room itself is now maintained by Lucis Trust, formerly known as Lucifer Trust, founded by Alice Bailey. Originally, it had a mailing address inside the UN of 666 United Nations, New York. This stone is, quote, the symbol of the God of all, unquote. Speaking at the 20th anniversary of the UN Meditation Room in 1977, Mueller said, "For me, the tall building of the UN is an edifice of human hope and dream jutting into the universe and receiving from that universe increasingly clear messages. Perhaps we have reached a time of cosmic evolution. Little by little, a planetary prayer book is being composed by an increasingly united humanity, seeking its oneness, its happiness, its consciousness, and its full participation in the process of creation." Robert Mueller joined the United Nations in 1951, soon after its birth. He was the assistant to 3 Secretary Generals, and he was the keynote speaker at the Parliament of World Religions in 1993. He advocates a one world religion and a one world government. He helped establish the University of Peace in Costa Rica, from which came the International Educational Goals, the foundation of Goals 2000, which was signed into law by President Clinton in 1994. Mueller's educational curriculum is based on Alice Bailey's occult teachings. The beliefs in the divinity of man and the coming of the cosmic Christ and the establishment of the Age of Aquarius. The Robert Mueller School World Core Curriculum Manual was published by the Lucis Publishing Company. The preface says, "The underlying philosophy upon which Robert Mueller School is based will be found in the teachings set forth in the books of Alice A. Bailey," unquote. When you graduate from high school or college, they give you that funny-looking black hat, which is a circle with a square on the top of it, with a gold tassel. Again, we see the alchemical squared circle, and it's also reminiscent of the Kaaba. When you graduate, the tassel is worn on the right side of the cap, but during the ceremony, it is moved to the left once diplomas are received. But once you have an undergraduate degree, your tassel remains on the left side for any higher degrees. There is no switching after that. Again, when we look at the Tree of Life, we see Saturn is on the left side, and again we have the black cube on the head, and the tassel moved to the side of Saturn. The Rockefellers are well known for having taken over the educational system to a large degree, and for also doing the same with the medical industry. David Rockefeller, in his autobiography, says that he has tried to build a global political and economical structure, a one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. We see the symbol of the UN has this eight-spoked wheel of Saturn that we've seen before. It is flanked by a wreath of olives symbolizing a false peace, and is made up of 33 sections. The WHO has a similar logo with the addition of a snake on a staff. Again, there are 33 vertebrae in the spine, and the Kundalini serpent goes up the spine into the Holy of Holies pineal. And it was them who instituted the heel prick that every newborn infant is subjected to. This is highly reminiscent of the snake bruising the heel of the child of the woman. And this organization is negotiating a new pandemic treaty. I think that word is kind of ironic, pandemic, considering what we've been talking about. But if this treaty passes, it would supersede the Constitution in the United States, and they would be able to mandate that everybody get certain medical procedures that you may not want to get. Before I describe the series of events that follow, the magical ritual they have been conducting on us to bring about first the Antichrist and then the return of Saturn, I must tell you who Saturn actually is. We've seen how Saturn represents the planet associated with the son of the night, ruling over the underworld. How the Nazis felt this Saturnian Shambhala vril, which is the same as Kundalini, Prana, Orgone, and Chi energy, seethed from the center of the earth. The story of the golden age of Saturn they wish to bring back. It highly mirrors the myth of the utopia of Atlantis, which was destroyed and flooded and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. The occult loves the as above, so below. As Saturn is the furthest reach of the solar system, the Gnostics believe trapping our souls here, it is simultaneously the furthest reaches of the pit below us.
And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months, and their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men, and they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions, and they had breastplates, as it were, breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. And their power was to hurt men 5 months. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon.
Revelation 9:11 tells us who Saturn is, the king of the bottomless pit, Abaddon, Apollyon. We've seen how the occult has identified this entity of Saturn with Lucifer, and I believe this is correct, and who the passages in Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14 are speaking of when most people attribute these passages to Satan. It is Abaddon who is king of the bottomless pit and associated with the shades and the dead in Sheol. It is also quite possible the stones mimicking the high priest, this entity may have started out as a very powerful, possibly even the angelic high priest. I'm going to put on the screen an excerpt from The Second Coming of Saturn by Derek Gilbert again that summarizes his case that this entity is actually Saturn and not Satan. But before he is released, the Antichrist reigns first, also ascending from the bottomless pit, riding or emerging from Leviathan, coming up from the Apsu, the abyss watery underworld. Satan, prince of this world, gives him his power and authority. I believe when the Antichrist is wounded to death, this is when the spirit of Abaddon inhabits him. The myth is the same amongst the snake religions of Babylon and Egypt, where the pre-flood fallen angel religion flourished, and it persisted among other cultures where these mystery schools filtered down through. It is the story of the dying and rising sun god. It is Tammuz to the Babylonians. To the Egyptians, it is the story of Osiris dying and going to the underworld to be reborn as Horus. Saturn, Abaddon, being reincarnated, inhabiting a man reigning in the land of the living, symbolized as the sun. Obelisks symbolize the drawing up of the seed from the underworld to inhabit the god-man on earth, Horus. It is all the religion of Nimrod, the first Antichrist figure. And that's what the Tower of Babel was. It was a portal to draw up the seed of Abaddon to inhabit a man to rule the entire world, and connecting to heaven for war against God. This is the New Age, the coming Aquarian Age, ruled by Saturn, Crowley's Aeon of Horus. The mystery religions carried on this occult knowledge through the millennia, and it's culminating right now. Just as they sullied Christ's birthday by placing it on the solstice, the birthday of the sun god and Saturnalia, they also took his true birth date of 9/11 and used it as a ritual to bring in this new age, ruled by the substituted Christ, the Antichrist. William Morgan printed this expose of Free M. He was killed shortly after this book came out. In the 17th degree, under the chapter of the Rose Croix, the degree of the Knights of the East and West, named after the Templars, says, quote, "Sign for entering the lodge. Place your right hand on your brother's forehead. He will do the same. Sacred word, Abaddon." A Free M website describes this degree as a symbol of illumination and enlightenment, as a divine union between man and God. It is symbolized by two interlocking triangles, is associated with Osiris, the god of death and rebirth, and describes it as a journey from darkness to light. This cube, this double interlocking triangles, this IXXI, is all leading to this event. This event happened on the same numerological day as the day Solomon's temple and Herod's temple were destroyed. There were some individuals who were dancing who were said to have been sent to document the event. These people were let go shortly after being captured by the FBI. A third building also fell. It was called the Solomon Brothers Building. I'll let you look this up yourself, but there was some strange connections to a art group called E-Team. Before we insert a clip where I've previously covered this subject matter and about the ritual that was performed that day. I would like to point out that this third building, built to replace the two that were knocked down, is literally a combination of the merged opposites. The double rectangular tesseract, when combined, it does form this higher dimensional cube, this octagon, this 8-sided hypercube.
You see, December 25 is not the birth date of Yeshua. No, it was actually the 9th month on the 11th day. I can't actually say what you would usually say because of that censorship that we're talking about, but the 9th month on the 11th day in 3 BC, and this was the Feast of Trumpets. Dr. Heiser covers this. I'll link it below if you want to watch it, but the eternal counterfeiter, who is reaching the end of his time, wishes to birth his own creation, the beast system, and the false Christ. So what better day to do it than the inverse of the real Messiah's birthday? The 9th month, 11th day, 2001, Gematria, 2 plus 1 is 3, so the original Messiah was 9th month, 11th day, 3 BC. This new system is birthed, 9th month, 11th day, 3. It is the inverse. And this is exactly what happened that day. We're told that 19 men with small knives overcame the world's most secure airspace and military apparatus. I'm not here to say who actually planned and carried it out. All I'm saying is that despite what you believe happened physically and who was behind it, what I am saying is there were dark spiritual powers that were working behind the scenes to make this happen. And on this day, Satan made a covenant with the beast system. You see, on Mount Sinai, when God made a covenant with the Hebrew people, 3,000 lost their lives due to disobedience with the golden calf in the face of God. And at Pentecost, 3,000 were saved. And on this day, the contract with Satan was signed with the blood of 3,000 souls. This day is also the New Year in Egypt. Leading up to this event, the Republican Party, in power at the time under Bush, did this. They never explained why the stars were turned upside down. And they put out this document called PNAC, Project for a New American Century. 1 year prior to this event, in this document they called for a new Pearl Harbor that would need to happen in order to enact a global control objective of the United States. It also says, later, biological weapons would be used. And if we look at the footprint of these towers, guess how they were aligned? Yep, back to Orion. And the height of the Great Pyramid, its uncompleted capstone, is equal to the first distance up of the World Trade before there's a break in the building. And we can also see that this 911 is the same numerological date as the destruction of Solomon's Temple and Herod's Temple. Tisha B'Av. And we can see that this, in Roman numerals, IXXI, is hidden in plain sight in the craft, in the Star of David, which is actually the hexagram. Hex means evil, right? It is not actually associated with Judaism. And with the Society of Jesus, or Jesuits. All of them have this IXXI embedded in their symbology. The day before this event, Donald Rumsfeld announced that trillions of dollars had gone missing. And the aircraft that hit the Pentagon wiped all this information out so that they could not trace back where that money went to. And even at the Pentagon, we have a memorial that has Orion's belt there. This event was openly spoken of on live TV exactly 11 years prior by Mr. CIA 1,000 Points of Light, Daddy Bush, during the State of the Union, where he announced, out of these troubled times, our 5th objective, a new world order. And if you sum up buildings 1 through 7, the height in feet is 6,660 feet. As the attacks actually occurred, President Bush was in a class where the kids were chanting this.
Get ready, yes, get ready, yes, get ready, yes,
he was reading a story called My Pet Goat. We could go on and on and on, and others have covered this information in depth. Again, I'm not saying who carried it out. I'm only saying that there were great spiritual forces behind this. In fact, entire books have been written about the numerology and ritual that day and how it closely resembles an Aleister Crowley ritual. I'll briefly go over a few anomalies. So the flights that were taken control of and crashed were Flight 11. Let's see what Crowley has to say about that. 11 is the number of magic in itself. It is therefore suitable to all types of operation. It is the sacred number par excellence of the new Aeon, as it is written in the Book of the Law, dictated by Lam Iwas. 11 as their numbers who are of us. It's the number of magic because, just like the merging of opposites, they have the right side up pentagram, 5, and the upside down pentagram, 5, plus the practitioner who is balancing these forces, 5, 5, 1, that's 11. The next flight is 77. Let's see what Crowley has to say about that. The sublime and supreme septenary in its mature magical manifestation through matter, written in Hebrew, Ion, Zion, OZ, Capricornus, the devil of the tarot, which is the picture of the goat of the Sabbath on an altar. 77 also represents half of the formulation of sexual magic in both the OTO, which is Crowley's religion that he carried on, and the Kabbalah. It is also the 77 infernal names of the devil in the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. 93 is the next flight. The Kabbalistic gematria values of the Greek words thelema, which is his religion, Crowley's religion, of will, agape, love, and Aiwass, in Crowley's magical system equate to the number 93. The matter is of extreme importance because Aiwass, in dictating the Book of the Law, repeatedly makes use of correspondences in Greek such as thelema, will, 93, agape, love, 93, 718 equals stele 666, and so on. Thus his own name is spelled in Hebrew has the value of 93. 175 was the other plane. Liber 175 in Crowley's magical system is a ritual used to invoke any deity by adoration. There are three main methods of invoking any deity. The first consists of devotion to that deity, being mainly mystical in character. They may not be dealt with in this place, especially as a perfect instruction exists in Liber 175. The second method is the straightforward ceremonial invocation. The third method is the dramatic and perhaps the most attractive of all. Certainly it is so to the artist's temperament, for it appeals to his imagination through his aesthetic sense. Taken together, the flights mean an invocation of a deity, which is associated with magic, Aiwass, and Satan. Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, which is 77 feet tall, on the 77th meridian, crashing 77 minutes after takeoff. And his father, George Bush's father, George H.W. Bush, who announced the New World Order 11 years prior, was 77 at the time of the attacks. And there was a plane flying above the Pentagon as this happened, and guess what the call sign of this plane was? Venus 77. Again, Venus is the pentagram, or the middle of the Pentagon. Flight 11 hit floor 93. Also, the only K9, K is 11, so there's another of 9/11, who died on that fateful day was named Sirius. And again, to the Egyptians, Sirius was the dog star. Sirius was dog number 17. 17 in the tarot is the star, which according to occultists depicts the star of Sirius. Again, there's entire books written about this, and if you want to know more, you can check those out. So after these twin pillars were knocked down, they put up a tribute in light, and this tribute in light had 88 xenon bulbs, 44 on each tower. 4 plus 4 is 8, 4 plus 4 is 8. Again, remember that these 8s are representative of the sun and moon. So even as the towers are knocked down, their memorial is this duality of the sun and moon in lights. You'll notice that these twin pillars were torn down and replaced with one in the middle, called the One World Trade Building. And we can see that the design of this has opposing triangles up and down, the as above, so below merged into one building. If you look at this building, it is two towers. One stays, the other placed on top and rotated slightly, as you can see. This One World Tower is literally the tower of the merged opposites in one. If we look at the view from the bottom of this tower looking up, it's very reminiscent of the Great Seal. And this One World Tower is 1,776 feet tall. They'll say this is because America was founded in 1776, but there is an organization of the Illumined Ones, which was also founded in 1776. In fact, George Washington himself in 1798 said, "It is not my intention to doubt that the doctrine of the Illumined Ones and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread to the United States. On the contrary, no one is more satisfied of this fact than I am." And Society of Jesus member Adam Weishaupt founded the Bavarian Illumined Ones May 1st, 1776. Again, he was part of this Society of Jesus. And remember the 19-year Metonic cycle making up the lunar calendar of the Babylonians, Greeks, and Pharisees? When the sun and moon again came into sync, or merged, this is when the next phase took place. Maybe we wouldn't mind a new order if it was to protect us. Meanwhile, sometimes the cure is worse than the disease, both of which were cooked up in alchemical labs. And this is the actual original design for the third pillar. It was somewhat modified maybe because this was a little too on the nose. For nations shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, and pestilence, and earthquakes in diverse places. And all of these are the beginning of sorrows. We could be seeing the pestilences right now. Revelation 18:23, all nations were deceived by your pharmakia. And, I mean, the elite say it over and over. There was I think it was Prince Philip, he said he wanted to be reincarnated as a virus so that he could take out a whole bunch of mankind. Zbigniew Brzezinski says, today it's infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people.
This is an actual article from the official CDC. They have, in reference to the corona V, a sun god with the corona, the sun symbol, on his head, riding a horse among 3 other horses. The Antichrist, sun god, is going to be riding the white horse among the 4 horses of the apocalypse. and that is the two definitions of corona. It has to do with a envelope of the sun as well as a crown. The rider of the white horse is said to carry a bow and is given a crown to conquer. This word bow is actually toxon, from the Greek toxikon or pharmakon. And we know that in Greek mythology, Apollo is acknowledged as the source of health and healing. He is the first god addressed in the Hippocratic Oath, and the father of Asclepius, the god of medicine. And if we look at the Sun Tarot card, it is the 19th trump card, and it has a child on a white horse with the sun. It's very, very interesting to look at the Operation Warp Speed logo. We have the rays of the corona with the corona V. In the background is a cube, and this is not any ordinary cube. This is the Antakarana. It's a Sanskrit term that means internal instrument. It has been called the bridge between the middle and higher mind, the reincarnating part of the mind. According to H.P. Blavatsky, it is an aspect or function of the lower mind and retains its initial purity, active whenever there is spiritual aspiration. Therefore, it is a bridge or path that acts as a two-way communication. It's also made up of 3 Vavs, which is the 666. There was also a very strange news article that came out. A new virus-like entity has been found in human gut microbes. They are called obelisks, and they're made up of novel circular RNA genomes. There is also going to be 2 eclipses that are 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days apart, and they form an X over an area of the country called Little Egypt, specifically over Carbondale, Illinois. Carbon, we know, has 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons. And chemically, it forms this hexagonal shape, 6-sided, just like the storm on the 6th planet from the Sun, Saturn. Incredibly, the person that came up with the structure for benzene, which is this hexagon shape, was inspired by the Ouroboros, which we saw earlier is Saturn itself. Another completely bizarre thing is that Space Command was re-established because of Trump's creation of Space Force. It was re-established mere months before the pandemic broke out. Incredibly, it was originally established exactly 32 years before the Revelation 12 sign happened. Another bizarre coincidence, the second leg of the X eclipse occurs exactly 120 years from when Crowley established contact with Lamb, the first modern depiction of a gray alien. It has been theorized that from Genesis, this 120 years of man is actually 120 jubilees, which are 50-year periods. This equals the 6,000 years until the coming of the actual Messiah. There is much contention about when Christ was crucified and when he rose from the dead, but there are many that think he actually was resurrected on April 8th in 30 AD. April 8th is also the conclusion of Ramadan this year, the holy Islamic holiday, which ran from March 11 to April 8. And again, March 11, 2020 is when the pandemic was declared by the WHO. And this formation of Space Command and Space Force reminds me of what Carol Rosin was told by Nazi scientist who helped fund NASA, Wernher von Braun, that space-based weapons would be established, followed by a fake alien invasion. The logo of NASA is very interesting as well. I'll let you just look at these images and you can conclude for yourself. Many people have theorized Stanley Kubrick had a hand in staging footage for the moon landing, which, by the way, they named the mission Apollo after the sun god. Again, this was an occult ritual, the merging of the sun god Apollo, which landed with the moon. People also point out how he exposed MK Ultra with A Clockwork Orange, and elite pedo activity with Eyes Wide Shut. He actually mysteriously died after releasing that movie, and the final cut was edited, removing parts of the film that may have exposed too much. There is another film he did that relates to the Saturnian cult directly. Considering what we learned about the occult ritual that has been ongoing, ushering in the beast system, we shouldn't be surprised it took decades to plan and facilitate. In the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, it centers around a monolith. In the year 2001, a guerrilla art project erected a replica monolith in Seattle. Later that year, the towers would be brought down. And Stanley Kubrick, he died 666 days before the year 2001 started. 19 years later, when the Metonic cycle had run a course of again bringing the sun and moon back together on the calendar, the next major stage of the ritual commenced, and the first CV case in America was located in Seattle. Again, mysteriously, as the shots were being distributed, which were fashioned like the One World Trade Tower, merged opposites of sun and moon, monoliths again began to be seen around the US and the world. Some really weird stuff happened in 1968. This is when the Club of Rome was founded. They released their depopulation booklet called The First Global Revolution, with the 8-spoked wheel on the cover surrounding the Earth, which named humanity as the enemy, and has been instrumental in bringing about Agenda 2030, which seeks to implement many goals to control humanity and reduce the population. The World Economic Forum, with an encoded eclipse and 666 on the logo, held a conference called Preparing for Disease X 2 months and 22 days before the eclipse on April 8. Mr. Schwab, who heads that organization, his father was somebody who supplied weaponry to the Nazi regime. We know this Saturnian death cult brings about chaos so that they can come in and be the saviors. This altar I'm showing on the screen was unveiled on 322, remember what organization has that number, and has a depopulation goal along with ties to Freemasonry and the Rose and Cross organization. The stones that make up this monument are an exact copy of the UN building. The UN and this monument just so happen to be almost exactly 666 miles apart, which also looks exactly like the monolith in 2001: A Space Odyssey. We'll be talking about CERN later, but just know this monument was destroyed one day after CERN was activated again. Sitting front row at the 2001 ritual was a Hilton building that was admittedly built to resemble the monolith, according to their website. And look at their logo here. Does that not look like a portal being opened up with those two towers? We need to note here that in Arthur C. Clarke's book, which director Stanley Kubrick turned into 2001: A Space Odyssey, the monolith was originally supposed to be the cube. The destination of the spaceship was also Saturn, but it was changed. Some believe it was changed because it was revealing a little too much about the cult and their plans. We've already seen what Mecca represents, but can you believe that the memorial for the two towers that got knocked down actually are a mirror copy of Mecca? And they also have the black cube within a cube, even with the Apsu of waters flowing down into the underworld being represented. Arthur C. Clarke also went on a rant about how they celebrated the millennium in the wrong year, because they started the BC to AD with year 1 instead of year 0. So he argued that 2001 was actually the new millennium. Also, the date of 9/11 is the new year in the Egyptian calendar. So, it could be said that 9/11/2001 was the actual date of the occult new millennium. And this is the new year in Egypt because this is when the dog star, which Isis represents, Sirius, is said to rise, and this is when the Nile floods. And she is said to bring up Osiris, which is represented as Orion, up into the sky at this time, called the heliacal rising. Again, even this memorial is fashioned like a popular Saturnalia game in the most ancient of Roman Christian calendars that also gives the earliest reference to Rome's influence of sun worship being blended with the early church via celebrating Christ's birthday in the Julian calendar solstice of December 25. This is the game that is depicted in that manuscript, and it shows 2 dice and a tower. It was said that the people celebrating Saturnalia would go home and play games, this dice game being one of them, which was based on this other Roman game. I'll show the picture here, but you can see this familiar symbol with the top and the bottom merging in the middle to form that merged opposites, and a 666 on each side. If the memorial does represent dice, then it is snake eyes. And again, the towers were lined up according to Orion's belt, as were the pyramids. And the AI that takes control of this ship is called HAL. It probably refers to IBM in one sense, as it's a one-letter shift. Again, IBM did work with the Nazi Party, as did the Bush's grandfather. And again, George H. Bush spoke of a new world order coming to be exactly 10 and 11 years before the event. And this AI was described as the 6th member of the crew. AI, if you substitute letters and numbers, is equal to 19. And again, remember the 19-year Metonic cycle. 2001 plus 19 is 2020. And that's when the pandemic occurred. And interestingly, the Metonic cycle, when mapped out, it is also the cube within the cube. We should note that 2001: A Space Odyssey was released in the same year as the groundbreaking of the first tower, 1968. That is also when the term corona virus was coined, based on how under an electron microscope its crown-like surface resembled the sun's outer layer called the corona. And again, that's when the Club of Rome was established, which had an eye on depopulation. And in 2001: A Space Odyssey, there was a fake pandemic story put out to cover the fact that they just made contact with aliens. This second leg of the eclipse is going through 7 towns that have Nineveh. And we know that Jonah went to go preach to Nineveh. And this occurred at the same time an eclipse, civil unrest, and 2 outbreaks of a plague occurred there. It makes me wonder if this disease X might be the next plague that's about to strike. Nam 3 condemns Nineveh because it calls it a whore because of the pharmakia she dealt throughout the lands. Are we being condemned for the same reason? One of the ironies about this whole situation is that through technology, we are kind of being drawn into another, less real reality. We play our Xbox and peer into the black screen for hours on end. Everyone is obsessed with these little black screens that are slowly becoming more intimate with us than the people around us. In a very real way, the Black Cube monolith is successfully breaking up human connection and replacing it with a simulated reality. We're being sucked into the illusion of the cube, into the Matrix. We've identified Saturn as the leader of the fallen angels from Genesis 6:4. The Book of Enoch identifies his original name as Shemyaza, and his fallen name as Yaquan, which means he shall rise. He was the leader and most powerful fallen angel. He was sentenced to the abyss for making the giants whose spirits became the demons. Jubilees tells us that 90% of the worst were also sentenced to the abyss. Shemyaza's son, I believe, was Gilgamesh, due to the Book of Giants found in Qumran. Just as God's Spirit, the Holy Spirit, allowed his incarnation to be fully manifest in a man, Yeshua, I believe this is also what the fallen angels did before the flood. Not only did they teach mankind magical workings, forbidden knowledge, and technology, they multiplied their spirits, placing them into humans as the giants. This concept is called Traducianism. The spirit is passed down in preceding generations from one original spirit. Gilgamesh was thus the spirit of Shemyaza, Abaddon, inhabited in a man. Nimrod, after the flood, built a portal connecting the underworld with the earth, and attempted even up to heaven. I believe he was successful in drawing up Gilgamesh's demon spirit to inhabit his own. Thus he began to become a Gibborim. This is what's meant in Revelation 17, where it says there are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, and 1 is. The other is not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7th, and goes into perdition. Nimrod, rather Gilgamesh Abaddon, was a king, and he will be again as the 8th. When the Antichrist receives his deadly wound, I believe they will be successful in once again drawing up the spirit of Gilgamesh to fully inhabit a man, just as he did with Nimrod. The title Son of Perdition is a title that applies to the Antichrist, even as he is described in Revelation 13. This phrase, Son of Perdition, will also further corroborate that the Roman angelic prince is the beast who is released out of the bottomless pit. The phrase Son of Perdition is very closely related to Apollyon. In the Greek, the phrase the Son of Perdition reads the Son of Apollia. Apollia means destroying or utter destruction in Greek. The Book of Enoch tells us that Shemyaza's crime, in addition to creating the supernatural army, was the cutting of roots. This again harkens back to DMT, Saturn, the third eye, and Horus Orion via acacia, as acacia roots contain the max DMT concentration. Deuteronomy 18:10 and 2 Chronicles 33:6 actually mentions this pharmakia in the Septuagint, alongside sacrificing children, again linking child sacrifice with this pharmakia. In Mexico, there were also pyramids constructed to align with Orion's belt. The deity there that demanded child sacrifice was called Quetzalcoatl. There was a lot of talk in 2012 about the Mayan calendar ending and Quetzalcoatl possibly returning. Christmas, December 25 of 2012, is actually the midpoint between 9/11/2001 and April 8, 2024, when the second leg of the eclipse passes through America. This really is all a battle for what's inside your temple. Shemyaza seeks to control your pineal and mark you. Yah, the God of the Bible, is also going to seal his people in the forehead. This is actually the protection from Abaddon and his minions, as we read in Revelation 9. They were told not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only the men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. Neither repented they of their murders, nor their pharmakia, nor their fornication, nor of their thefts. Revelation 9:21. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God, and I will also write on them my new name. Revelation 3:12. And to the angel of the church in Pergamos write, He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh, I will give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in a stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saving he that receiveth. Revelation 2:12-17. Hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Revelation 7:3. Then I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. Revelation 14:1. I think they are trying to recreate the Stargate of Babel to crown the God-men on earth, just as they did for Nimrod. There is a new type of computing called quantum computers that is claimed to actually reach into parallel universes to pull out information to find solutions to problems faster than regular computers. This company is called D-Wave, and these computers that are reaching into other dimensions are actually shaped like black cubes. Another technology and machinery that's trying to break into another dimension is called CERN. This is actually where the internet was founded, and they put www in every address at the beginning of the website, and in Hebrew is 666. The director of research and scientific computing at CERN said, quote, "Out of this door might come something, or we might send something through it," unquote. And in front of the CERN facility is a statue of Shiva, the Destroyer. And there's just so much darkness associated with the banking industry. Once again, the Templars were the first bankers. But there is one investment firm that owns the majority of almost everything, and the name of this investment firm is BlackRock. Rothschild means red shield, and maybe that has something to do with the Templars or the Knights of Malta. And on their estates is a temple to Apollo. There is just so much Saturnian symbolism in logos. I'll just put it on screen, but it's everywhere. And Atlas was said to be the king of Atlantis, which we've identified as Shemyaza. And Atlantis and Shemyaza submerged down into the ocean. And we can see that the CERN project has a part that is called Atlas. And their logo has interlocking sixes, of course. In fact, CERN itself is named after Cernunnos, the horned god of the forest. It is another iteration of Pan, Saturn. And they had this weird mock sacrifice on the CERN property right in front of the Shiva the Destroyer, just like Apollyon and Abaddon. And the town where CERN is located was called Apolliacum in Roman times, and had a temple of Apollyon the Destroyer there. And right down the road from CERN, on June 1st, 2016, a tunnel was constructed, and they had a just extremely bizarre ceremony take place. I'll put some of it on screen here. The Great Falling Away is well underway. Some Christians today associate God's Sabbath that he gave on the seventh day as Saturn worship by a restrictive God boxing them in. And the cross of Christ came to free us from the repressive law of the Old Testament given by a God who knew we couldn't keep it. They often portray the Old Testament God as cruel and vengeful, just like Saturn, and the Son as his good counterpart, coming to save us from him. This is Gnostic blasphemy that's sadly being perpetrated through time. Keeping God's law is how Christ told us to live, and is our means for escaping the prison abyss of the real black cube. Quote, "Don't suppose I came to do away with the law and the prophets. I did not come to do away with them, but to give them their full meaning. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota nor a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished." Matthew 5:17-18. "If you love me, keep my commandments," Yeshua said in John 14:15. Well, what is his commandments? In John 7:16-18, he said, "My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. If any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine, whether it be of God or whether I speak for myself." Revelation 22:14 says, "Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to eat of the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city." The reality is, we're all being drawn to a cube. Yahuwah's heavenly abode, the New Jerusalem, is a cube made out of gold and jewels. Rather than escaping earth and our bodies, the Bible actually describes our promise of new bodies and ruling on earth. The goal is not to transcend, but to restore this planet and our bodies as we reign with him here on our beautiful inheritance, earth. Because the New Jerusalem is going to come down and land on earth where we will reign. Quote, "That the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole of creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies." Romans 8:21-23. "I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will take his stand on the earth. Even after my skin is destroyed, yet from my flesh I shall see God, whom I myself shall behold, and whom my eyes shall see, and not another. My heart faints within me." Unquote. Job 19:25-27.
And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away." And he that sat upon the throne said, "Behold, I make all things new." And he said unto me, "Write, for these words are true and faithful." And he said unto me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. And there came unto me one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials full of the 7 last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. And her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal, and had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city and the gates thereof and the wall thereof. And the city lieth 4 square, and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. And he measured the wall thereof 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, of the angel. And the building of the wall of it was of jasper. And the city was pure gold, like unto clear glass. And the foundations of the wall of the city were garnished with all manner of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third a chalcedony, the fourth an emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardius, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth a topaz, the 10th a chrysoprasus, the 11th a jacinth, the 12th an amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Every several gate was of 1 pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, as it were transparent glass. And I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. And the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it. And the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, for there shall be no night there. And they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. And there shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life.
This is a fallen world from Satan, Abaddon, and their ilk, and the entire world is being manipulated and controlled by this Saturnian death cult. They are conforming it to their image of complete destruction. The Black Cube in Tartarus is the true prison where the fallen angels and demons reside, a place of no escape, and they want you to end up trapped, tormented, just as they are. And it is the complete opposite of the cube that awaits us in Christ. Be not deceived into believing their Messiah coming up from the Black Cube is the real one. Be not a partaker of the whore of Babylon on her beast and end up a resident in her city and suffering her plagues. Rather, be a pure, undefiled bride for the Lamb and reign in Zion. Yeshua said we will see him as he ascended, coming back on the clouds. He will be proceeding from the New Jerusalem cube, coming down from heaven, where our paradise is also coming down to the earth, restoring Edenic paradise. I pray this has been a blessing to you. Shalom.